What's going on, Sunbelt fans? My name is Dominic Rossetto, the host of the Sunbelt Syndicate podcast, where we review the week that was and look forward to the week ahead in Sunbelt football, basketball, and baseball all year long. Follow us on all social platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So let's get into this last week of regular season basketball action in the round ball roundup, as we've called it all year long. So Wednesday, February 22nd, we had Old Dominion taking down Southern Miss in kind of a shocker. Southern Miss looked like they were going to have the conference championship possibly wrapped up if they had won that one. But Old Dominion decided to spoil the plans there. Mekhi Long with 20 points. Felipe Haase did pretty well for the Golden Eagles with 18, but ODU comes away with the victory. We had Marshall getting a big win over James Madison, 92-83. Tavion Kinsey, the player of the year in the Sun Belt, comes away with 31 points. Terrence Edwards, also one of the better players in the conference for this season, comes away with 26 in that one. In some of the lesser teams, after some of those top teams there, we had Georgia Southern taking down Coastal Carolina, 76-68. Kamari Brown with 14 points. Josh Uduje, who had some pretty big games earlier this season, comes away with 22 points and is really the leading scorer in the game, but not enough to get the victory for the Chants. App State, Georgia State. App State takes that one 78-52. Christopher Mantis, 22 points. When he's shooting hot from three, App State is a pretty decent team. And Brendan Tucker with 19 points for the Panthers in that one. We also had Troy and ULM go to overtime, where Troy took that game 82-78. Eugene with 17 points. LaCourte went absolutely off with 33 points all by himself. Unfortunately, it was not enough to get the Warhawks off of that losing streak that they are on to end the season. South Alabama takes care of Texas State 76-67. Isaiah Moore with 22 points in that one. Brendan Love follows for the Bobcats with 18. Arkansas State and Louisiana, probably a little closer than some expected, but the Cajuns take the win in that one, 85-74. Jordan Brown goes off for 24 points. Omer El Sheikh goes for 18. As far as Friday's games, we had Marshall dropping a game to ODU when they had a chance for the conference championship. Old Dominion spoiled those plans. Chance Jenkins goes for 23 points. Andrew Taylor matches him with 23, but ODU just too strong right there at the end at home to win that one. Georgia Southern takes down App State 73-64. Andre Sarasov, 28 points. CJ Huntley has 14. Not nearly enough for App to get it done there. And Eagles take the victory in that one. Arkansas State takes care of ULM 64-61. Caleb Fields 15 points. LaCour does have another great game with 24, but again, can't get them off that losing streak. Troy takes down Coastal Carolina very easily, 95-74. Eugene again, high score, 19 points. Antonio Day goes off for 28, but again, can't get the chance on the winning ways there towards the end of the season. Southern Miss takes care of Texas State 79-69. Haase has 26 points for the Golden Eagles. Mason Harrell, 16 points for the Bobcats. James Madison crushes Georgia State 90-69. Morse with 19 points. Tucker again leads the way for the Panthers with 16. South Alabama drops one at the very end there against Louisiana. Jordan Brown goes off for 28 points. Isaiah Moore, 22, close behind, but Cajuns take the victory in that one, 74-64 to end the regular season for the Sun Belt. As far as what that does to the standings, a little bit of movement there with that last game going the Cajuns' way. But Southern Miss comes out on top with only 4 losses all season long in conference play. Louisiana and Marshall both end up with 13-5 records. JMU there at number 4 with 12-6 record overall. So those are your top 4 seeds going into the Sun Belt Conference Tournament. Going to have 2 kind of buys, if you want to say it that way. Definitely don't have to play their first game until Saturday. As far as everyone else below them, we've got Troy, ODU, Georgia Southern, South Alabama, Appalachian State, and ULM occupying that kind of middle section. All these teams hovering right at or just above or just below 500. And then we finish up with the bottom four: Texas State, Coastal Carolina, Arkansas State, and Georgia State as well. Those four teams are going to play the first games on Tuesday. So we'll jump in and take a look at the overall bracket as far as the conference tournament goes, but I just wanted to touch on a couple statistical things before we get into that. Some interesting tidbits. So this is the conference tournament. So I took out anything non-conference, just taking a look at some of the best offenses and defenses. Might give you an idea of what we're looking at for conference tournament play. So Marshall is the top scoring offense, but if you look at their defense, they are ranked 12th in the conference. So an interesting dynamic there. They are still the best in margin of victory. So no, they don't play the greatest defense, but they are scoring plenty of points for it not to matter that much. So it'll be interesting to see if someone can come along and keep them from scoring as many points and really put the pressure on them to play a bit better defensively. It's going to be interesting because if they run into a hot team, unfortunately, Marshall doesn't have any really tune-up games. They won't be in one of those top four teams. So it'll be interesting to see if that plays a role when you get into those deeper games in that quarterfinal area. As far as Louisiana goes, very similar. Louisiana, number 2 overall in scoring offense, but number 11 in defense. So it's kind of interesting that a lot of these teams are high-scoring offenses, not the greatest defensively. Very interesting aspect when you really look at the numbers. Meanwhile, you've got James Madison at number 3 offense overall, coming in with a 7th-ranked defense. Again, all just conference play only. But as far as the averages go, them and Southern Miss are really right there because Southern Miss is just below them at 4 with the 6th-ranked defense. So interesting to see that. To note, South Alabama is the number 1 ranked defense with App State right behind them. Interesting dynamic there is just App State is down at 10 for offense overall, while South Alabama is sitting at 7. So both those teams kind of just underneath those 2 or 3 teams there at the top when you look at the averages, with James Madison and Southern Miss probably being the best per average. So we won't get into too many other statistical things, but did just want to throw that out there because you figure a lot of the teams at the top are great offense and pretty good defense overall, but it's interesting to see when you compare these things side by side of where some of these teams are at offensively so high and really defensively pretty low. So not something I expected to see. There isn't really a team that's really mid or above mid in both things. Texas State was one of the best defensive teams all season, and they came in with the final ranking of 5th overall in the conference. But again, they don't score a whole lot of points. They are 13th offensively, so kind of the opposite of Marshall and Louisiana there with the better offense and the worse defense. They kind of have a better defense and not a great offense. So again, we just wanted to throw those out there before we jumped into this bracket to take a look at my thoughts and opinions, and we will see how many of them come true. But I'm going to go ahead and go through the entire bracket at this point, and we'll see how right or how wrong I am when this is all said and done. But I'm going to go ahead and go over this before we know all the real matchups. Obviously, the first game's on Tuesday, we know, with a couple of the second round games on Thursday. But Tuesday, February 28th, we've got Coastal Carolina matching up with Arkansas State. I am taking Arkansas State over Coastal. They've already beaten them 73-57 in the only meeting this year. I don't see any real reason for that to change. I think Coastal's kind of been on the downward spiral towards the end of this season. Arkansas State hasn't been that much better, but I did think that win towards the end here is going to help them. They've got some guys who had some injuries. I think that a couple of them may be back in a little bit stronger than they've been this season. I think they get the win over Coastal in that first round game. As far as the second game goes, we've got Texas State matching up with Georgia State. I am going to favor Texas State in that one. Georgia State, not the greatest team here to end the season. Texas State, again, they did not have the season that they expected. But again, we just talked about Texas State's defense. I think that's what's going to win them the game here in this one, because Georgia State, they did have really one big outbreak offensively this season. They scored over 100 points against Coastal Carolina. They didn't really put up that kind of output any other game, so no consistency there for me to worry about them kind of doing that against Texas State. They didn't play each other this year, But again, I just think the Bobcats defense is a little too strong, and I expect Texas State to move on. That'll take us into Thursday. We've got South Alabama playing Appalachian State. I think this is a bad draw for App State. They've already beaten App State 74-57, so it wasn't even that close of a game. South Alabama also on a 5-game win streak before that season finale loss to UL. To me, South Alabama didn't play all that great in that game. Credit to Louisiana for being a reason on that, but I just haven't seen enough consistently out of App State to make me think that they're going to beat a team, even with the loss, as hot as South Alabama has been coming into that one. App State's offense has not scored enough points for me to think that they're going to be able to battle down low and take advantage of Kevin Samuels inside there. Then we have Troy would be ending up matching up with Arkansas State, as I had them picked over Coastal. They did already play them twice, and Troy has beaten them 66-54 and 67-62. Troy's only loss on the stretch run, which was 7 games, was to Marshall in Huntington. So to me, Troy has been almost as hot as South Alabama down the stretch here. Maybe didn't play as quite the quality of teams overall, but I'm going to favor Troy to take care of a down and out kind of Arkansas State team, even with a first round victory over Coastal Carolina in that one. Then we've got ODU matching up with the winner of the first round game, Texas State. Much like Troy, ODU's won 6 of the last 7. Last 2 wins versus Southern Miss and Marshall. They've also beaten the Bobcats team 70-68 in San Marcos. I'm going to favor actually gets a little bit bigger of a victory here. I think Texas State will do everything they can to win that first round matchup. Might drain them out a little bit. Old Dominion coming in, really good performances here. Last 2 games of the season kind of overperformed. I think that continues for at least one more game here. I think they take the victory over Texas State. This next one's where it starts to get interesting. We've got Georgia Southern matching up with ULM. Southern the 7th seed, ULM the 10th seed. I don't know. I think ULM, they did beat them earlier this season 72-59, but they did end the season with a 7-game skid as well. So it's kind of interesting to see how these two teams kind of match up. Both teams are absolutely terrible on the road. And this is obviously not a true road game because neither team's really home or away. It's a neutral site, but regardless, you're playing away from your home venue, and neither team has done very well in that regard this season. I just have to think that ULM bounces back. They can shoot really well from 3. Locor has been really hot these last few games. It's the other players that are kind of letting the team down just slightly, and I think they all kind of come together to get at least one victory here in this tournament. So I am taking ULM in the slight upset there over Georgia Southern. That'll take us on to the quarterfinals starting on Saturday. We'd have South Alabama versus Southern Miss. I'm going to favor the Jags to get an upset, and here's why. Seems like they kind of have their number. They won the last game by 31 points. Yes, they did lose the other game, but it was only by 4 points total. So I'm going to kind of average that out, say this game's probably still close. But South Alabama is just so hot, and I think they match up really, really well with Southern Miss. Southern Miss has got to come in here with a lot of expectation. Not saying they can't win, obviously. I just think a little bit of pressure, expectation, maybe, thought that you should just be kind of penciled in. I don't. It might get to them. I'm going to take South Alabama in a big upset here. Maybe not the biggest upset, but a upset here. And I think the Jags move on from that matchup. Then we'd have James Madison versus Troy in the second game. I'm going to favor Troy in this one. They did play once already this season, and James Madison took that one in overtime by just 2 points. So I think Troy gets kind of the revenge or avenges that loss from earlier in the season and takes out JMU. So that would be 2 of the top 4 teams losing in the first 2 games on Saturday. Probably unlikely, but hey, that's what I'm predicting. So we'll see how those first 2 games come out. Then we would have ODU versus Marshall. Obviously, this kind of be a rematch like we saw at the end of the season. I think ODU's defense does do something to Marshall. If you look at the scores, Marshall comes in scoring quite a few points, then they play ODU, don't score as many. They get back to scoring a lot of points. They finish the season up, don't score as many points against ODU. So they match up very well with Marshall. But I don't know. I just think Marshall has got the shooters to get it done more consistently. I think if ODU doesn't have a great game, I think that's where Marshall takes advantage. So I'm going with my first chalk of the day and taking Marshall overall in that one. Then we would set up with the Louisiana matchup with the Cajuns versus the Warhawks. I'm going to go chalk for a second time. So against the chalk at the top of the board, all chalk on the bottom of the board. I think ULM doesn't really match up well with UL. It's kind of the opposite of ODU and Marshall. UL has beaten them twice already this year. I don't see the Warhawks being consistent enough. Like I said, I think they'd have to play really well to beat Georgia Southern, which I think they could do because they could shoot hot from three, which has been their MO most of the season. Earlier in the season when they were winning a lot more games. Not so well now, but I think they could win one. I just don't see them winning two. So I've got Louisiana in that one. At the top of the bracket, then that would put South Alabama versus Troy. This is actually kind of similar to the Southern Miss matchup for South Alabama with a close loss and a blowout win versus Troy already. Again, I just think South Alabama has really hit their stride, put it all together at the right time of the season. Yes, they actually had a loss to end the season. I don't think that's a bad thing, though. With where they were at, with the consistency they had, I think a loss makes them regain focus, probably work on those things that didn't excel well in that UL game, focus on the things that didn't go so well in the other matchup versus Troy, and really nail those things down and be ready for a Troy team that's going to come in wanting that big upset. So then we'll go back to the bottom of the bracket. We have another rematch between the Marshall Thundering Herd and the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana. It'd be a great matchup. It was a good game going into the game, actually. The game itself didn't end up being all that great. Louisiana won quite easily over Marshall that first time out. I just don't think Marshall matches up extremely well with Louisiana. I think Louisiana's presence on the inside is a little bit better. Hanlogden, I think, is going to be a good player, but I think right now he's probably just too young to dominate a game like Brown can do for Louisiana. So I see UL coming away with another matchup there because I just think the defense is too strong, and I think that a big game from Brown down low can really turn the tides in favor of Louisiana. So that would set up a championship game on Monday night on ESPN2 between South Alabama and the Cajuns from Lafayette. I just got to go with the Jags here, honestly. I think it would be a great game. I think there could be a number of teams that could be in this game that could make it a great game, but I really think this would set up for one of the better matchups we could see. Yes, they did lose. South Alabama did lose to Louisiana previously, but they had a 5-game streak before that, as we've mentioned previously, and they're 8-2 in their last 10 overall. I think they just avenged the loss where they didn't really play all that amazing there in Lafayette. Didn't have a horrible game by any means, but they didn't have one of their better games, and I think that was the main reason that they lost. I think they play much better in this game. The build-up's going to be big. It's going to be on national television. They're going to be looking for that big spot. Kevin Samuel, I think he's just going to come out and dominate a game, and obviously Moore is being their shooter, their go-to. I think he's going to get it done. That tandem working together is just too hot right now, and I'm going to favor the Jags to go all the way through and take the one-bid league. Unfortunately, I don't see a real way we see more than 2 from the Sun Belt this year. I think the good news for the rest of the teams here is that this season has started to change the minds of some people. Unfortunately, not a ton of people are paying attention up until this point. So what we need to do is not only have whoever comes out of here, as I'm predicting the South Alabama Jaguars to do, but whoever ends up coming out of here has to do some damage in the tournament and really get people nationally to focus on the Sun Belt becoming a much better basketball conference. That's thanks, obviously, to Southern Miss, Marshall, and James Madison coming in, as well as ODU. Don't want to forget them. All coming in being very quality basketball programs. Obviously, Southern Miss and Marshall really turning around from where they were last season before they joined the Sun Belt. Southern Miss was really predicted to be one of the bottom teams in this league before the season started. Marshall wasn't predicted to be very high either. So James Madison and ODU were kind of towards the middle of the pack, I believe. So all 4 of those teams overperformed where a lot of people thought they would. And that's not a bad thing because now we've got a stronger basketball conference than we've ever had. I really, truly believe that. I've been following along, not nearly as closely as I have this season, but I really think this basketball conference has gotten a much, much stronger in just 1 year. Can't wait to see what year 2 holds. Obviously, we'll see if my predictions hold, but those are my thoughts on how this bracket's going to play out. I can't wait to watch these games. Specific games and specific scores we'll still do on the social media, and we'll see if we get some games right. So enjoy the games this week, and we will wrap up what will end up being the Sun Belt Conference basketball tournament in the next episode. Thanks for listening.